Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode of UmattR TV. We have a special guest with us here today, and we'll start down the line introducing ourselves. So, Victoria.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and I'm super excited for this episode.
Hi, I'm Bria Cohen.
And my name's Curtis Young.
And I actually didn't introduce myself, so hi, I'm Trey Jones, and I'm a senior at Farmington High School. So our first question we have for Dr. Young is Bria.
So you're a previous UmattR member, so what do you remember from when you were a UmattR role model?
So I remember being a senior and somebody saying there's this program, we're going to try to inspire younger kids to try to be good students and eventually go to college and make their lives make a difference, I guess. And so they said, come up with something to tell the kids that will make them feel like they matter. And I remember pointing to people's fingerprints, actually, and saying that the fingerprints represented their unique identity and who they were. No other kid in audience of 1,000, not 1,000 in Farmington, 100 kids, 100 kids, everybody's going to have their own unique fingerprint. So I would just tell little 5, 6, 7-year-olds, look at your fingerprint, that's you. And there's never going to be another you. And so what you do with your life matters. And that was the message we tried to get across. And I remember doing things like talking to the kids and getting to meet other teenagers in Farmington and Aztec and the Four Corners that were involved in it, and feeling inspired by some of them too.
And you were in the first team that they implemented this program, right? Yeah,
so it's been a while, so I guess the memory's a little faded by now. But yeah, the first group. And we made little sports cards, which I think you guys do, and I still probably have some in my closet at my parents' house, buried somewhere.
Oh, we'll have to get some.
Yes.
Mine was the only one that was landscape at the time, and it was with my soccer ball, which I don't play soccer, sadly, much anymore. But it was fun.
Awesome. And that you answered my question as well about your greatest takeaway from UmattR. So next we have Victoria.
Yeah, so, you kind of touched on your story. So, now we all have, our own individual stories based on things that happened to us in, our past. So was your story, talking about the fingerprints, was that what you told, or did you tell anything else?
Tell me more about the story. What do you mean?
So, example for each of us, I guess at presentations we talk about something that happened to us, whether it's divorce or bullying or mental health. And we share a story, a personal story of how it affected us in our life. So did you guys have stories that you shared, or was it more of we just want to try and make an outreach?
I don't know if we specifically looked at something in our past that we tried to overcome or some barrier that we faced. I don't remember that being that in depth. This is good that you guys are thinking about these things and doing that. There's certainly things I can think of now that I've gone through, but one thing I would say, maybe to you guys too, was feeling especially when I was your age, that I had to be perfect. And I was so scared of messing up that I really didn't get to do a whole lot, because I knew if I had put myself out there and tried some things and then messed up, that I wasn't going to be perfect anymore. And I really thought that being perfect was my way of getting people to like me. And so if I was the smartest kid in the room or the guy who knew the answer, that was my role in my little friend group. I was the guy who had the answers and the guy who was going to be a doctor someday. And then as you get older, from 18 to 33 now, discovering that there actually is something important in Curtis Young that isn't just being the smartest guy in the room. One, because I'm not, but two, because there's actually something about us as people that is separated from what we can do. It's more of who we are. And who we are is made up of these different experiences and things we've been through, like mental illness or family difficulties or growing up maybe in a different type of home than some other people. So yeah, that's good that you guys are thinking about that. But no, we didn't do it when I was there.
Interesting.
Awesome. thank you for sharing. So you touched a little bit on as you grew up and everything, so that's Bria's next question. She'll be touching on your upbringing.
So you've gone through a lot of schooling. So what was your favorite part of school or favorite experience or?
And could you also touch on what process of schooling you went through becoming a physician?
Right. So when I talk to patients, my patients that are in high school, and I try to get them to think about what they're doing, they ask me sometimes, how long were you in school to become a doctor? I was like, well, my 20s. So 18 to about 30 years old is how long it took. And that's to become a family medicine doctor. Might be a little bit longer for other things, but the best part of that, do you mean before or after high school?
Anything.
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 Oh, I enjoyed high school. Once you get through middle school, I thought high school was pretty fun. College was even more fun because it was kind of like high school, but you had more freedom and also more responsibility. You get to set your own schedule. You didn't have the same classes every day. Maybe you had classes 2 or 3 days out of the week, and then they said, here's this time, go use it. And you got to explore new things. You know, I went to Albuquerque, which isn't that far away. We called it the university next to mom for UNM, but it was far enough away that I got to go do things that were different. I mean, I hadn't been in a city with an interstate and meeting all kinds of different people from other countries that are in this university. And so college was really fun. So I'd probably say college. And I started taking, got to learn, I really liked viruses. I studied virology before anybody cared about viruses. And, we studied influenza, which I thought would be really boring, but the influenza virus is actually pretty fascinating. Bird flu was out at the time, and some kids in my dorm actually died from swine flu.
Really?
So nobody shut down anything back then. So we got to learn new things. We got to be involved in a new city, new group of people. It was hard for me growing up in a small town when I had known my friends since kindergarten, and almost none of my friends went to Albuquerque, but you get to meet new friends and do that, which is a new skill set that you got to learn to put yourself out there and meet new people, but it was good. And then you hit med school, and med school was just a fire hydrant flying in your face for 4 years. But there were still some good things to it, too. But I would say college was probably one of the best.
And how did you handle the difficulties of a fire hydrant medical school? What would you say was like the greatest challenge that you encountered during
in med school?
Med school and beyond.
Yeah. So I would say one thing, I guess, to you, and I don't know if you edit this out later, but personally, the thing that you get too is you get your book or your ebook or whatever nowadays. You get your elbows up on the table, you get your book there, and you're stuck in a library or a classroom or something for a long time. And your other friends are going outside and they're going to the zoo or they're going to parties or they're doing things, and you've got to be disciplined enough to hang out with the book for a while. And so I did a lot of that in college. And that was a choice that you had to make. And some people probably were more balanced than I was. I was not very balanced because I told you I have to be perfect. And so I was I was taking classes that you were supposed to take one after the other, and I was taking them at the same time, and I was getting grades better in those classes than people who were taking them one at a time. And I just burned myself out a lot in college, just in the grindstone, in the library, trying to be the best that I could because I felt like I had to. That's who I was. I was supposed to do this thing. And then I finally got to the end of college and started to realize, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. And then when I got into med school, I had a little bit more of that sense. So I understood the balance part. The getting into med school, though, once you get into med school, you actually have a little, I would say, you don't get an option of that great of balance. So you're forced to spend a lot more time, but there's also a community of 100 people in your class doing the same thing. So you get some camaraderie in that. There's maybe a little less partying going on in med school, but you're still going to face some of those choices of could I go do this or do I do this? And, so I would say one of the big things I learned in college was don't isolate yourself so much. And then I used that when I went into med school, and I had to do it like everybody else, but I tended to do things with people a little bit more. So if I had to be there with my book, I liked having other people in their books around me.
Nice. And you mentioned out of medical school you chose family practice and family medicine, so Victoria's going to touch on
So, what was the hardest part, I guess, about choosing a specialty? Were you interested in other ones, or did you always know you wanted to do family medicine?
So there's some good different ways of looking at what type of doctor you want to be once you decide you want to be a doctor. Some people say, do you want to do things or do you want to think about things? And I was always more of a thinker than a doer. But I liked doing some things too, so I didn't want to totally be a thinker. And so I wanted something that would give me a little bit of procedures, a little bit of thinking, and sort of, like Sherlock Holmes, problem solving, that type of stuff. You guys know Sherlock Holmes was modeled after a doctor, right? Yeah. So he was actually an ophthalmologist. But you're thinking about things, you're doing things, and the biggest thing with family medicine was I wanted to see my patients more than once. I wanted to get to know them over time. I wanted to see them get better over time. As I got it further and further along into med school, you're exposed to all this different stuff. And I realized that if I was just going to treat somebody once for a heart attack or something like that and never see them again, I just didn't know if that would be as rewarding. I was tired of putting out fires so much, and I wanted to prevent the fires from happening. So preventative medicine and public health, that's also a big part of family medicine. But you still got to know. I also love, like I said, maybe from I was studying all the time, right, for all these years. I like learning. In family medicine, you constantly have to learn, because anything can walk in the door. So you never stop learning. So that was a part of it. I liked relationships with people. I wanted to prevent bad things from happening, and I wanted to keep learning and keep pushing myself as I went further along in this thing. And I like doing some procedures, so I do some colonoscopies, do some skin procedures, all of that stuff. Yeah.
So let's say you're placed in a hypothetical situation. If you could go back and do it again, and we know you'd want to go into family practice, but if you could go back and do it again, what specialty would you choose other than your current?
Oh, other than family medicine?
Yes.
That's a good question. I don't think I could be a surgeon because I don't know if I could do it longer. I might have gone into cardiology.
Cardiology?
Or internal medicine and been a hospital doctor. Okay. So.
Thank you. And then our next question is from Bria.
I'm from Victoria.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Go next.
Victoria.
I go next. Okay. So as you know, the senior Young, what is it like working with him?
I love my dad. Part of the reason why I went into family medicine, I guess I should have told you earlier, was role models. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the guys I work with now, including my dad, were good role models for me. And I don't know if you guys ever did this. I did this in high school. I think when I was a middle schooler, they give you the t-shirt for the high school varsity team. And you put on the t-shirt and you look in the mirror and you're like, this is me. I'm going to be on varsity someday when you're an 8th grader. Well, I did that almost in med school, where I sat behind one of the other doctors who works there at his desk, and I was like, this is the one place I can actually see myself working. So someday you get across something when they're out of the room and you sit behind their desk and you go, this is going to be me someday, or their computer or whatever you're in. You sit in their shoes and you go, I could do this. That is a big indicator that you're doing the right thing, I think. And for my dad, my dad is really good about building relationships with people, obviously cares about education and teaching like I do, and bringing you guys along. And I mean, dad can take a really difficult situation and get people to know, first, that he cares about them, and then second, because they know he cares, they're willing to listen to him. And people actually willing to listen to their doctor is what leads to these internal motivators for change that help people live healthier lives. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part. And my dad's, he's been there a long time, lots of experience, and he catches a lot of dangerous stuff before it happens too. So, there's a lot to learn from him. I'll miss him when he retires someday.
Yeah. He can't retire.
Even if I like to tease him and give him a hard time still. Because I'm sure you guys
Very
never
true.
have your parents trying to push you, and you're like, I got this, I can do this.
Oh,
okay.
never, never.
So
And then Bria has our next question about advice.
So we all are planning to be future physicians. So what's your advice to the future generation of doctors?
So medicine's becoming more, I would say, technological, like the rest of the world. And in the, I worked in Africa for 3 months in a village on the border of Ghana and Burkina Faso. It was a place where it was almost like the Four Corners, but you can imagine if Arizona and Colorado all spoke different languages. And so, I mean, there was English, there was French, there was tribal languages.
Oh, wow.
And most of these people were illiterate. And we had an x-ray machine and we had a portable ultrasound.
Wow.
And so me and my nurse named Friday would go around, and she would be my translator, and we would evaluate people and try to solve things and help people the best we could. But we didn't have much technology, and so you had to touch people, you had to listen to people, you had to do a good physical exam, which gets missed a lot. And here, because we can just order an x-ray or a lab test, or you hit the button in the computer and then it pops out a result, and we're kind of disconnected from that and disconnected from the patients. So I guess 2 things in the future of medicine. 1, learn ultrasound, because that's going to be the new stethoscope. It's way more accurate, and I started to learn some of these skills as I was coming on, but the system just isn't in place yet for me to really use them. But as it becomes more and more common, I think you guys will depending on the field, unless you become a dermatologist maybe, but you're going to use ultrasound. And so doing that, but ultrasound, you're right next to the patient, you're touching the patient, you're talking to the patient. 90% of the answers come from talking to people. So, a lot of times that's how you solve it, like Sherlock Holmes. Actually, like Sherlock Holmes' older brother Mycroft. Do you guys remember Mycroft?
Oh my gosh.
So Mycroft didn't even have to go anywhere. He would just sit in his office and hear the story, and he would solve it in his head. And a lot of times medicine's like that. You hear the story, talking to the patient, and they give you the history, and then you solve it. So, anyway, that's the thing. Just maintain. The biggest thing I would want the next generation of doctors, other than hopefully to come work with me someday, is to maintain the human connection with people, which I think is going to get further and further. It's going to get pushed further and further away.
Well, thank you. And then Victoria has an overarching question for you.
Yeah, so I feel like you've touched a lot on hard parts throughout your journey, so I'm going to rephrase my question, and I'm going to ask you, what was the hardest part of your journey mentally as you were becoming a doctor?
So when I was in college, like I told you, I isolated myself because I was working so hard, because I had this perfection bar here. And because of that isolation, too, also coming from a smaller town and meeting new people and building new friendships and stuff, and just being in a new community. I've moved to 3 or 4 different cities now since high school, but the first move to Albuquerque was definitely the hardest, because I didn't know the place as well, I didn't know the people as well, and I was working really hard. And because of that, I got depressed. And I didn't really know what depression was. I don't think we were as good back then about emphasizing mental health as it's better. It's better now because the pandemic has pushed so many people into anxiety and depression, I think. But even before that, I didn't know what was wrong with me. Nothing seemed to matter. Talk about you matter. Nothing seemed to matter. Everything felt pointless. And when you start doing the things that you normally do and everything starts to feel pointless, that's not okay. And I was never suicidal or anything like that. It was just, like I said, everything felt pointless. Everything felt empty. Everything felt meaningless. And even though I was doing really well in school and still on track with everything. But if you get to the end of something and you realize you're not really you at the end of it, then there's no point of it. There's no point in doing it. If the hardest fight, I would say, I took this from a rock song when I was in high school, but the hardest fight is the fight to be yourself. And that was the values that I had going into high school and college and medical school. I had to hold on to who I thought I really was as the external pressures came on to try to crush that. And so I did eventually get help, and medicine and counseling, but that was something that I didn't even know was an issue until I was like way deep into it. And so that would be I guess, the thing I learned and overcame, and then is something that is always going to be in the back of my mind. It's always going to be a possibility. Maybe I have somewhat of a more melancholic personality, but that's always something that you're always going to try to fight to not fight against that sense of meaninglessness by filling your life with what is meaningful. So that was something I really learned in college, and it was a good lesson because I needed it in med school when the pressure ramped up a little bit more.
Well, that's an awesome lesson. We've been asking you really, really hard questions, and Bria, you might want to connect your thing real quick. But
Yeah.
we've been asking you really pressing questions, so we have one lighthearted one for you. The last
Sure.
one is, what do you do in your free time? Between all your different priorities, family, your job, everything.
So I do have a new baby. It was really exciting. Excellent advice to teenagers is don't have a baby till you're 30 because they're expensive and they take time. But the baby's fun. I also I like to spend a lot of time outdoors, and usually like kind of off on my own. But my wife goes with me, and I like to go with my wife. But away from other people, other than her and the dog and the baby. But yes, so hiking and backpacking, skiing sometimes, tennis, those types of athletic things. I also, when I was in high school, hated history. And if somebody asked me in high school, what's the point of history, I'd be like, to have good dinner conversation topics. Because all of my history teachers were football coaches. And some of the football coaches, I guess, are pretty good, but I feel like I learned nothing. And then what I've discovered recently is I actually really like history. And so on my lunch hour, I read history books.
Really?
Yeah.
So you swapped from a different perspective?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
So Mesopotamia, Sumeria, Egypt, ancient Greece and Rome, doing, oh my gosh, what's his name? I'm reading a book series, actually. It's based on the Netflix show is based on it, The Last Kingdom. But it's about 8th, 9th century Danes versus the English. So, I'm getting into medieval history now, but I had to do ancient history first. So I finished the Roman Empire, got into medieval history, and I'm still a way amateur historian, but I think I don't know. That's something that if you would have told 18-year-old Curtis, hey, you're going to like history someday, I would have laughed in your face. And I listen to audiobooks a lot, novels and fiction and nonfiction and history. But, you get a free app from the library, or you get your parents to pay for Audible or something, and you listen to an audiobook. That's totally fun and not school related. So, poetry or fantasy or sci-fi or anything that's not medicine. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, we've sat here and asked you tons and tons of questions, so do you have any questions for us?
Yeah. So what's the biggest thing you guys have gotten out of doing the UmattR thing so far?
Who's going first?
How about you, Bria?
I think it's just really great being we're with a group of 15 seniors from around the county, and it's just really great to meet new people and to share our stories with each other, and going to the assemblies and seeing the impact we're making is so inspiring. I think we're all in awe of each other and seeing how much we've grown since the beginning, and it's just so fun for us.
Mm-hmm.
And this started in August, or?
No, what?
It was
Way before then.
It was
We knew we
late
got
summer
in
months.
In May.
And then it started from there.
So
Not
we
the
doing
presentations,
meetings
but
together
yeah.
and learning how we were going to tell our stories and how to do our skits. And we did, I think, our first assembly in August.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was really profound when we all shared our own stories together. I
Everybody
think
was in shock.
We have known of each other since kindergarten, growing up in the same small town. or in
we've
the
grown
same
up
area.
together. I
You would've
remember being in
never
elementary
I've
with
known
you.
Trey since kindergarten,
Yeah.
so hearing each other's stories and of the other members and not knowing what we've gone through, but being able to hear their stories, it was just so impactful. So.
I think the greatest thing I've gotten out of UmattR is, I think going into it, you thinking of it as just like another opportunity for yourself. But once you actually get into it, I think more or less you realize you learn more about yourself, like what you're capable of and what you were capable of whenever you're going through what you're going through. And more of like the kids that you're reaching out to, they also teach you a lot. Which is like, I feel like kind of like an old thing to say. Like, I'm like only an 18, a senior in high school. But like they teach you a lot no matter the age. They have random questions, they blurt out weird answers. One kid asked us why all our foreheads were shiny. Do you remember that? But it's like
they asked if we were single.
You learn a lot from the kids that you interact with, and you learn a lot about what they care about and if they actually relate to you. And I think that's the best part, is you're actually doing something instead of just doing it, if that makes any sense. And I think that's what's the best part for me.
Yeah, and for me, my story has to do with a lot with mental health challenges. So whenever I share my story, I was originally really hesitant getting too into detail because I thought it might be too heavy for younger kids, elementary, middle school age, and that it puts me in a really vulnerable position. But I realized I was their age when I was going through some of these challenges, so it was really rewarding through UmattR program to help know that even if I just affect one kid's life who's going through something similar, to receive help and acknowledge that what they're experiencing is real and validate and know that there's help available has been awesome.
Well, I think it's a good habit to kind of see the kids, because then you realize, wow, I was in elementary school, and then you go, I was in middle school, and it's a lot closer to you guys. I barely remember that, although I do remember being a little kid in the library that we're in right now. But one thing I used to do is there's a hill up the top of Sullivan, and it's probably, I probably shouldn't say this because I feel like it's probably running through somebody's backyard, but you get up to the top of this hill, and from the top of that hill on Sullivan, I could see my high school, I could see my middle school, I could see my elementary school, and you could see it all. And Farmington's small enough, you can get up in some of these hills and see these things and realize how far you've come. And it doesn't matter how far you're at, it's always good to look back and go how far, and realize how far you've come. And for you guys to be seniors now at the end and doing well and inspiring other kids, but to actually take time and reflect on that and realize where you were at that stage and what you needed to get to the next one, and somehow that happened. Middle school was a really scary thing at one point. High school was a really scary thing at one point. College seems like, whoa, what is that? And then med school, no way. But you know what? You made it from one step to the next step to the next step to the next step, and it worked out every single time. And sometimes you just got to go sit on top of a hill and think about that. And one thing I would do is take these things. Actually, it's actually an old biblical thing, but you take. Farmington is perfect for this. You get these rocks, and everything that you've done that has been difficult, you think about that rock. I really struggled with that mental health issue, and this was this stone. And you put that stone down, and then you go and you find the next stone. I was really scared. I was bullied by that person, but I overcame that. And you pick up that stone, and you put it down. And then you get another stone, and you're like, I was struggling with this, but that's not a problem anymore. I'm better, I'm stronger for it, and you put it down. And then by the end, you got this pile of stones in the dirt, which we have plenty of opportunities for that here. And you think about each of those stones and what that meant to you, and you get this pillar there. And that's what they would do in ancient times, but we can do it, and I mean, people do it with a pen and paper, but there's something about picking up a stone and building a pile of it sometime. I'd recommend it and thinking about it, because as you go through life, that pile is going to get bigger. And you're going to realize there was that time I didn't think I was going to make it, and I did. So that's my advice. But you guys are great, inspiring, and reminds me of, you help damper down my cynicism maybe sometimes when I forget that I started this out with ideals in mind and goals in mind. And as you get older and older, the hope is to hold on to those things, right? And like I said, the biggest fight is the fight to be yourself and remember who you are and not let that change. So, because you matter, I feel like
Matter.
I feel like the theme song should play or something.
We
Okay.
need that.
It wraps up everything we said right there.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Okay.
I think we can all agree you've shared some very insightful comments with us today. And we thank you all for joining in this episode of the UmattR TV for our special edition with Dr. Young. I hope you all have a great evening and take care. Bye.